Hello, and welcome to Blogging Heads TV's first annual end-of-the-year predictions. For this occasion, Mickey and I are experimenting with a format that we call the diavlog. It's kind of like a video email where I say something on camera, send it to Mickey, he looks at it, says something in reply, sends it back, I reply, and so on. We put them all together into a seemingly seamless conversation. It's kind of like time-lapse photography. One byproduct of it is that sometimes we seem to think faster than we actually do. That's a very welcome byproduct as far as I'm concerned. As viewers of our regular dialogues know, we sometimes could use that illusion. So here goes. The first category of predictions is seemingly outrageous predictions. These are things that seem to the average observer impossible, things that couldn't possibly happen during 2006. And we're not really saying they're out and out probable, but we are saying they're a lot more likely than is acknowledged, which is to say they have some degree of likelihood. So basically, if they don't happen, we're not really wrong. If they do happen, we're geniuses. So it's a can't-lose thing. I'm going to start with, by the end of 2006, Hamas recognizes the right of Israel to exist. Sounds crazy, I know. That's the whole idea. And that's why I'm sure I will have to elaborate on my logic before this is over. But first, over to you, Mickey.
Hey, it's Mickey. I guess I don't understand why Hamas would endorse Israel's right to exist, since Hamas seems to exist to deny Israel's right to exist. For my long-shot prediction, I predict that President Bush, by the end of the year, will become much more of an activist president, in that he will endorse a universal mandatory health insurance system based on the system being tried out by Governor Mitt Romney in Massachusetts, which would require every individual to buy health insurance the way individuals in most states are required to buy auto insurance.
Mickey, first of all, your lighting looks great, much better than mine. Keep it up. As for your prediction, would this mandated health insurance include enough subsidies for low-income people to qualify as left-wing, is my question. If not, then I'm not impressed. As for my prediction, Hamas, like other organizations, exists to provide material and psychological benefits to its leaders and members. If you can change the prerequisites for those benefits, then you can, in principle, change its behavior. In particular, acquiring actual political power has a history of moderating previously radical groups, and Hamas has a chance to acquire actual power through elections in January. Interestingly, a few months ago I read an interview on the Al Jazeera website with some high-ranking Hamas guy in which he said he rejected the expansion of Israel since 1948, as I recall. Now that implicitly, it seemed to me, meant that he was accepting the right of Israel to exist within its originally allocated borders. Now that's still a radical position, because he's rejecting the expansion of Israel reflected in the 1949 armistice, which pretty much everyone accepts. So he's talking about a very small Israel indeed, but it's his very radicalism of this position that makes it at least plausible that Hamas could adopt it. If Hamas did, that would be a major step forward. Over to you.
Okay, on these long-shot predictions, on your Hamas prediction, I'm glad that acquiring political power tempers formerly radical groups, but isn't that the intellectual heart of neoconservative idealism? I mean, the idea that if we spread democracy, then formerly radical groups will be tamed and the world will be a safer place. If it works in the occupied territories, and it works in Palestine, why can't it work in Iraq? Why isn't that the justification for the Iraq project? And in fact, the dissident Sunni groups are about to acquire some power, some share of power. And if that tames them, then the Iraq project might well be a success. On my long shot prediction, which may not be such a long shot because Bush may propose universal mandatory individual coverage in his State of the Union speech, but it's probably not. I don't think the problem is the subsidy level for the poor. I mean, Romney has some subsidy. The real poor still get Medicaid. The working poor get a subsidy. That's not the problem. That's just dickering over money. The real problem is, would the plan destroy the insurance market? In other words, would It'll let insurers pick and choose the best risks, leaving the worst risks to pay through the nose, and would it let insurers sort of game the system by writing partial coverage. Basically, if you like the Medicare drug plan, you will love the Romney mandatory coverage proposal. So I think that's what the debate will be about. Let's go to something that has actually more of a chance of happening. Why don't you make a prediction that you actually think will come about?
Mickey, I'll let that be the last word on your long shot prediction. Here's the last word on my long shot prediction. You're right. There is a parallel between Hamas doing well in the upcoming elections and some pro-insurgent Sunnis having been elected to parliament in the Iraqi elections. In both cases, it raises the prospect that you could wind up with a negotiating partner who can actually control the violence, and that's a prerequisite for successful negotiation, and that's why I consider both a possible step toward good. So I don't see any inconsistency in my position, as you seem to be suggesting. There may in fact be an inconsistency on the right. I suspect that if you ask some Iraq hawks who applauded this dynamic in the Iraqi elections, they would say that they don't want Hamas to do well in the upcoming Palestinian elections, and may even want to impede Hamas's participation, which I think would be a big mistake. In any event, you seem to be conflating this parallel, which I buy, this Hamas-Iraq parallel, with a second parallel, which I don't buy, which would be between my Hamas logic on the one hand and the logic behind the initial invasion of Iraq to establish a democracy. That parallel I don't buy. Time doesn't permit me to enumerate the many reasons I don't buy it, but I would say I'm speaking as someone who actually considered that the best of the rationales for invading Iraq, even though I didn't ultimately find it persuasive. As for my prediction that I think may actually have a 50% chance or better of coming true, here it is. First of all, another killer hurricane season. Second, finally, the causal link between global warming and intensified hurricanes will enter the mainstream of public discourse. So far, and this will hurt the Republicans. It'll put them on the defensive with things like Kyoto. So far, the Republicans have succeeded in marginalizing this question. Like last hurricane season, they said things like, surely you're not suggesting that any one hurricane that we can know for sure was caused by global warming. Well, no, and we're not suggesting that you can ever know for sure that any one case of lung cancer was caused by cigarette smoking, but that's beside the point. We know smoking contributes to lung cancer, and there's more and more evidence of a parallel dynamic in the case of global warming and hurricanes. So that'll be real progress in that particular debate. Now over to you for your next prediction.
Hey, fair enough. I could go with a really obvious one, like that comprehensive immigration reform isn't going anywhere. But that's like a layup. It's a 100% possibility. At least if you define comprehensive as including some sort of earned amnesty for people who are now in the country illegally. So I'll go with two ones with less of a probability. One, at some point there'll be a straw poll that Hillary Clinton will lose, which will cause a huge kerfuffle in the Democratic Party. Two, change at the top of two major American institutions, General Motors and the New York Times. I think Ford will rebound of the two big American-owned Detroit companies because they have a pretty good new designer and a good product lineup. General Motors won't, and I think Mr. Wagner, while he may be great, won't be able to withstand the PR pressures to step down. And one more little scandal or business setback, and I think the Sulzberger family will decide that their shares are taking too much of a beating by Wall Street. The line on Wall Street is the New York Times is a great company with a terrible publisher, and at some point the Sulzbergers may decide to bring in another Sulzberger rather than the one that's there now. I have more, but maybe later.
Okay, Mickey, so in sum, your predictions are Ford up, GM down, Pinch out. I hope Pinch's departure will not mean that we can no longer deploy the moose, if you know what I mean, and I'll provide a link for viewers who don't. My prediction, my next prediction is that by the end of 2006, Iraq will not have degenerated into a full-blown civil war. However, it may well be clear by then that Iraq is not going to remain a single nation. And one reason would be that the Bush administration is actually ambivalent about Iraq remaining a single nation. The Dick Cheneys in the administration would like to keep troops in Iraq for the next millennium or so, and the only way that's going to happen is if they are deployed in the Kurdish region and Kurdistan becomes an independent nation. Otherwise, they are not going to be permitted to stay. So there's actually kind of a conflict of interest within the administration, and the Iraqi people may become hostage to that. Over to you for your next declaration.
Hi, Mr. Wright. This is Al Gore here. Mickey asked me to step in for him. I want to comment on your prediction first about Iraq. Now, I don't think in the age of high-tech weaponry and all these gizmos and gadgets we have, excuse me for a sec, my BlackBerry just went off. Yes, I don't think that with all these gizmos and in the high-tech age that a forward base is worth what it used to be worth. So I think we have the standoff capability, and the value of the base doesn't outweigh the rancor and resentment it would cause in the Arab world. So I don't think the Kurdish base is worth splitting up Iraq. I think we still want a united Iraq. Now, Mr. Cheney may disagree, which brings me to my prediction. And my prediction is that I, Al Gore, will be running for president against the Republicans in 2008. Now, I don't know that I'm running for president yet. I haven't done anything to prepare my campaign. But as you know, I've cast my lot with the Move On Left. I'm against the war. I've spoken up against the war. I'm a voice for them. They resent Hillary. I hate Hillary from the 2000 campaign, as you know. So when the left rises up against Hillary, they're going to demand a champion, and Russ Feingold just doesn't cut it. So I'm going to be unable to resist the limelight and the publicity. So I will be running even though I don't know it. One thing I won't be running is Current TV, my TV station. We're not doing too well there. We don't have the secret of the web. You at Blogging Heads seem to have the secret of the web. You have the secret of stickiness, the secret of sleepiness. You've maybe borrowed some techniques from my own performance in the second debate against George Bush, I think. But I don't want to be immodest here. My question is, where do you think you will be next year? Will Blogging Heads exist? Will you be rich? Will you have a media empire? Will you be a donor to my campaign? So, Mr. Wright, I ask you that question.
Al, first of all, please call me Bob, okay? None of this Mr. Wright stuff. Don't put me up on a pedestal, okay? Now, it's true, you and I are not men of exactly equal accomplishment. I founded a burgeoning or possibly soon-to-be burgeoning media empire called Blogging Heads TV. You founded a TV channel which, frankly, I had forgotten about until you just mentioned it. And even when I used to think about it, I used to get it mixed up with the Bush administration's, magazine for Arab youth, which, as you may have read, recently ceased publication. Okay, so you and I aren't exactly the same plane, maybe, but I'll tell you, there's one thing we agree on, Al. You should run for president. Okay, you ask why? 5 words: the complexity of your mind, man. Okay? Good example is the way you, on the one hand, predict that you will be running for president, and on the other hand, you're in some sense not aware that you will be running. Okay? Al, a wise man once said that genius is the ability to hold 2 contradictory thoughts in your mind at once. And I think the Oval Office could use a little more of that capacity. In fact, after the last 5 years, I'd settle for somebody who could hold just 2 thoughts, two non-contradictory thoughts, in his head at once. For example, maybe we should invade Iraq, and what do we do after we invade? Okay? I think that would have been just a killer combination. So I encourage you to run. You ask about the future of Blogging Heads TV? Well, as Nostrablogus looks into the future, December 2006, he sees a claim for Blogging Heads TV, even in some corners adulation. He sees Mickey Kaus in his Pope Mobile cruising the streets of California. The streets are lined with throngs of aspiring groupies. And Mickey looks out from his Pope Mobile, and every once in a while he says, "Yeah, you'll do. Why not just step inside my Pope Mobile?" Where will I be? Toiling away in obscurity as usual. You know, the unsung hero, the unmoved mover, if you will. The Larry David to Mickey's Seinfeld, you know. And this is before Curb Your Enthusiasm. And that's okay. I'm not bitter. I'm not the kind to get bitter, and Al, I know you're not the kind to get bitter. It's fine. It's okay. Where were we? Blogging Heads TV. I don't know how I got sidetracked. Blogging Heads TV, yeah. We will continue to grow and evolve. For example, right now, you're looking at our first ever diavlog. Whole new genre, maybe. And there will be other changes. Al, I assure you that you will not be our last eminent guest. There will be new faces. There will be new amenities. For example, we will soon have an email address up so that people can send in feedback about the site, which we could use. Speaking of which, and if I could shift into a more serious vein, we would like to thank those of you who have found a way to send email to us, notwithstanding the lack of an obvious way, and more generally, those of you who have been tuning in regularly during the first 2 months of our existence, in spite of our somewhat irregular broadcast schedule. We really are appreciative. We do encourage you to keep tuning in. We expect after the holiday siesta we'll have something new up about midweek, first week of January. So check it out. And meanwhile, Happy New Year from me, Mickey, Eric, Greg, and, of course, Al.